Hey friends, tonight we drift into smoke. Not the kind from chimney stacks or battlefield muskets, but from long bamboo pipes curled between trembling fingers. You've heard the myths that the British Empire civilized Asia, that trade opened doors, that progress was mutual. But the truth, it's darker and far more profitable. This is not just the tale of tea and treaties. It's about silver bleeding from empire, of addicts lining palace halls, of aristocrats trading poison wrapped in parchment. It's about how one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, China, was unraveled, not by swords or revolution, but by a narcotic and a handshake. So before you settle in, like and subscribe, and tell me what time it is where you are. Imagine, if you will, the vibrant tapestry of the 18th century, not the bustling capitals of Europe, nor the burgeoning industries of the West, but a land far, far away, across vast oceans. This is China, a civilization that, for millennia, saw itself as the Middle Kingdom, the very center of the known world, its culture and wisdom radiating outward like the sun's warm rays. You stand on the fertile plains, feeling the rich soil beneath your bare feet, absorbing the gentle warmth of the sun around you. The landscape stretches as far as the eye can see, a masterpiece of human ingenuity and natural bounty. Terraced rice paddies climb hillsides like giant green staircases, shimmering with reflected light, fed by ancient irrigation systems that whisper stories of generations past. Farmers, their backs strong from toil, move rhythmically, a silent ballet of cultivation. The air is alive with the subtle symphony of nature, the chirping of cicadas, the distant lowing of an ox, the rustle of bamboo groves in a soft breeze. In this world, everything is self-sufficient. There is a deep, quiet pride in the ability to provide for oneself, to create beauty and utility from the earth. You wander through a bustling market in a village, the scent of freshly baked bread mingling with the sweet fragrance of jasmine tea. Stalls overflow with wonders, bolts of shimmering silk, dyed in hues of imperial yellow, sapphire blue, and crimson red, catching the light like liquid jewels. You run your fingers over the smooth, cool surface of a porcelain vase, its intricate blue and white patterns telling a story of dragons and scholars. The craftsmanship is exquisite, each piece a testament to centuries of inherited skill. Passed down through diligent practice, artisans are hunched over their work, their hands moving with practiced grace, their faces serene. And then there is the tea. Oh, the tea. It is not merely a beverage here. It is a ritual, a philosophy, a way of life. You watch as delicate leaves are steeped, their aroma rising like a comforting mist, warm and earthy. You feel the smooth porcelain cup in your hands, its warmth spreading through your fingers. The first sip is a journey in itself, a quiet awakening, a gentle reassurance. Tea is consumed in hushed courtyards, in bustling tea houses, in the quiet solitude of one's home. It is given as a gift, exchanged in negotiation, offered in welcome. It is the very essence of Chinese hospitality and tranquility. From this vantage point, you observe the world beyond China's borders. The Western nations, far away, seem a distant murmur, their restless ambition a stark contrast to the settled rhythm of the Middle Kingdom. China exports its treasures, the lustrous silk, the fragile, exquisite porcelain, and, most importantly, the aromatic tea across vast oceans. These goods are coveted, desired by the burgeoning elites of Europe. But China, in its wisdom and self-reliance, sees little need for what the West has to offer. Its needs are met, its people content, its culture rich beyond measure. The idea of importing much from these distant lands feels, to you, unnecessary, almost absurd. Why bring in what you already possess in greater beauty and abundance? Therefore, trade with these foreign entities is tightly controlled, a carefully managed trickle rather than an open flood. All foreign commerce is funneled through a single, designated port Canton, known today as Guangzhou. Imagine the scene at Canton's docks, a vibrant, controlled chaos. Merchants in their traditional robes, their faces unreadable, negotiate with foreign traders whose bustling energy and loud voices feel strangely out of place. The air is thick with the smell of spices, timber, and the salty tang of the sea. Massive junks, with their distinctive sails, sit alongside Western sailing ships, their rigging a tangled web against the sky. Guards, silent and watchful, patrol the wharves, ensuring strict regulations are upheld. It is a portal, yes, but a carefully guarded one, designed to protect the integrity of the Middle Kingdom from undue external influence. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, across the swirling, vast expanse of the ocean, a different story unfolds. In the grand drawing rooms and quiet studies of Great Britain, a fervent obsession has taken root. It is an obsession with the very tea you just sipped in that peaceful courtyard. The British, a nation of tea drinkers, cannot get enough. From the highest aristocracy to the humblest cottager, the daily ritual of tea has become ingrained, a comforting constant in their lives. The demand is insatiable, the thirst unquenchable. And so, to pay for this ever-increasing flow of tea, a steady stream of silver begins to flow out of Britain and into China. Imagine the heavy chests, gleaming with precious metal, carefully loaded onto ships, traversing the globe. For a time, this arrangement works. Silver, universally valued, is the acceptable currency. But as the demand for tea skyrockets, the balance tips precariously. Britain, a global power, finds its reserves of silver diminishing, draining away into the coffers of the Middle Kingdom. The coffers are finite, and the thirst for tea, it seems, is not. You sense a quiet alarm growing among British merchants and policymakers. A realization that this one-sided trade cannot continue indefinitely. Something must shift. Something must change. And so, as the moon climbs higher in the tranquil night sky, casting long, soft shadows, you hear a subtle whisper carried on the wind. A new currency is being sought, a solution to this economic dilemma. And it comes, quite unexpectedly, from the delicate petals of a flower with a beauty that belies its true, insidious nature. The hum of the world seems to deepen, as if anticipating a profound and irreversible change, a subtle shift in the balance of power that will echo through centuries. The murmur of the wind carries a new scent now, a sweetness that is strangely cloying, almost sickly. You are transported to the vast, fertile plains of British India. Here, under the relentless gaze of the sun, fields stretch to the horizon, not with the familiar grains of sustenance, but with a different kind of crop. Delicate, papery poppies, their petals a vibrant display of white, pink, and crimson, sway gently in the breeze. From these deceptively beautiful flowers, a dark resin is harvested, a substance known as opium. It is a powerful narcotic, an ancient remedy, but also a potent tool of subjugation. The British East India Company, ever resourceful and driven by the relentless pursuit of profit, has found its solution to the silver drain. These poppies, grown on Indian soil, cultivated under British control, will become the new currency. It is a chillingly ingenious plan, conceived in the desperation of economic imbalance. The irony is not lost on you. Opium, though deeply harmful, is not permitted for sale in Britain itself. Its dangers are well understood. Yet, it is deemed perfectly acceptable, even desirable, as a tool of trade with a distant empire. So, the clandestine operations begin. Imagine the hushed conversations in dimly lit docks, the furtive glances exchanged, the quiet loading of chests onto ships under the shroud of darkness. The opium, carefully packed and labeled, begins its long journey across the Indian Ocean, bound for the shores of China. It arrives not through the official, sanctioned channels of Canton, but through a shadowy network of smugglers, slipping past watchful eyes, a silent invasion. You can almost hear the soft lapping of waves against hidden coves, the quiet creak of oars in the dead of night, as the illicit cargo makes its way inland. At first, the demand for this new, insidious currency is weak, almost negligible. China, in its self-sufficiency, had no real need for such a foreign substance, particularly one with known dangers. You might see a curious few experimenting, a tentative interest. But the British merchants, relentless in their pursuit of profit, are patient. They know the nature of addiction. They understand that. Like a tendril of smoke, it needs only a small crack to insinuate itself, to spread. And spread it does, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. The tendrils of addiction begin to twine themselves around the fabric of Chinese society. You witness the subtle shifts: a quiet cough, a faraway look in someone's eyes, a growing lassitude. Initial experimentation turns into casual use, then into a deep-seated craving. It spreads not with the roar of a wildfire, but with the quiet inevitability of a creeping fog. From wealthy merchants and scholars seeking new sensations, to impoverished laborers seeking an escape from their daily grind, the silent epidemic takes hold. The sweet, cloying smell of opium smoke becomes more common, a ghostly presence in the air. By the 1830s, the transformation is complete, devastatingly so. The numbers are staggering, a silent testament to the scale of the crisis. Millions upon millions are now hooked. Their lives subtly, yet irrevocably, altered. You see the hollowed eyes, the emaciated bodies, the families torn apart by the relentless grip of the drug. The vibrant markets you once visited now have a different undercurrent, a subtle sadness that permeates the air. The strength and resilience you sensed in the Middle Kingdom begin to feel like a fading memory, replaced by a growing weariness, a profound despair. And as the human cost mounts, so too does the economic reversal. The steady flow of silver, which once enriched China, now reverses direction. The precious metal, painstakingly accumulated over centuries, begins to drain out of the empire, flowing back to Britain, exchanged for the very substance that is destroying its people. You can almost hear the quiet clinking of coins, a hollow sound as the wealth of a nation is siphoned away. The once proud coffers empty, the reserves dwindle, and the Middle Kingdom finds itself facing a crisis not of external invasion, but of internal decay, a silent poison seeping into its very core. As you stand amidst this unfolding tragedy, a new sense of urgency begins to stir. The emperor and his court, initially slow to grasp the full magnitude of the problem, begin to realize the catastrophic implications. The silent alarm turns into a growing outcry. Something must be done. The creeping shadow must be confronted. And within the hallowed, opulent walls of the Qing court, a single man, resolute and determined, decides he can no longer stand by. He decides, with a quiet strength that belies the enormity of his task, to fight back against this encroaching darkness. He is a man who will stand against the tide, a man who will dare to say no to the most powerful empire in the world. His name is Lin Zexu, and his quiet defiance will ignite a fire that will consume an era. The despair that had settled over the land begins to stir, replaced by a flicker of hope, a whisper of defiance. You find yourself in the bustling city of Canton in the year 1839, where the opium crisis has reached its agonizing peak. The air, once thick with the aroma of tea and spices, is now tainted by the sickly sweet smell of opium smoke, a constant, pervasive reminder of the silent enemy within. Here, a man of profound conviction, a scholar and an official of unwavering integrity, steps forward. This is Viceroy Lin Zexu, a figure whose very presence commands respect, whose quiet resolve resonates through the city. You watch as he arrives, his demeanor calm yet firm, his eyes reflecting a deep understanding of the peril facing his nation. He is not a man of bluster, but of methodical action. He knows that to save China, he must confront the source of its agony head-on. His mission is clear: eradicate the opium trade, sever its insidious grip on his people. It is a bold, almost audacious campaign, launched in the very heart of the opium trade. Imagine the scene as his orders ripple through Canton. You see the hushed anticipation, the tension, as officials and soldiers move with purposeful determination. Lin Zexu demands that all foreign merchants surrender their opium stock. The foreign traders, accustomed to their illicit profits and contemptuous of Chinese authority, initially scoff. But Lin Zexu is unyielding. He surrounds the foreign factories, cutting off supplies, isolating them, until they have no choice but to comply. For weeks, the standoff continues, a battle of wills, until, finally, the vast caches of opium are surrendered. And then, the dramatic, symbolic act of destruction. You stand amidst a crowd, a sea of faces etched with a mixture of awe, hope, and trepidation. On the shores of Human, near Canton, a massive trench is dug. Into this trench, over 20,000 chests of opium are poured. Imagine the sheer volume, chests upon chests, each containing hundreds of pounds of the black, tar-like substance. The air becomes heavy with its potent, unpleasant odor. Lin Zexu, ever meticulous, ensures that the opium is mixed with salt and lime, then washed out to sea, rendering it utterly unusable. You hear the cheers of the onlookers, a collective sigh of relief, a moment of triumph against the encroaching darkness. It is a powerful statement, a clear declaration that China will no longer tolerate this poison. But Lin Zexu's actions extend beyond the physical destruction of the drug. He understands that this is not just an issue of trade, but of morality. He pens a letter, a profound and eloquent moral plea, addressed directly to Queen Victoria of Great Britain. You imagine his hand moving across the parchment, each stroke imbued with earnestness and dignity. In this letter, he appeals to her conscience, reminding her of the principles of justice and humanity. He points out the hypocrisy of Britain banning opium at home, yet promoting its sale abroad. It is a heartfelt cry for understanding, a hope that reason and compassion might prevail. The British response is swift and chillingly unequivocal. They refuse. The plea falls on deaf ears, drowned out by the clamor of commercial interests and the rigid self-righteousness of imperial power. The destruction of the opium is seen not as an act of national salvation, but as an affront, an egregious violation of property rights. You sense the growing indignation among the British, a simmering resentment that will soon boil over. The tension in Canton becomes palpable, a hum beneath the surface of daily life. Then, a spark ignites the tinder. An incident occurs, a dark shadow falling over the already strained relations. A British sailor is involved in a skirmish with Chinese locals, resulting in a death. The details are murky, lost in the confusion of the moment. But the outcome is clear. Lin Zexu demands that the sailor be handed over for trial under Chinese law. The British refuse, asserting their extraterritorial rights, their belief that their citizens are beyond the reach of Chinese justice. It is a clash of legal systems, a collision of worldviews, played out in the streets of Canton. In retaliation, Lin Zexu makes another bold move, a risky, yet deeply symbolic one. He bans the sale of food to foreigners. Imagine the impact: the withdrawal of vital supplies, the gradual tightening of the noose. It is not an act of aggression in the traditional sense, but a strategic pressure point, designed to force the British to comply. You sense the grim determination in his eyes, the heavy weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He is pushing the boundaries, knowing that each step carries immense risk, but believing that the survival of his nation depends on it. The city holds its breath, the silence before the storm settling heavily in the air. The standoff is complete. Negotiations have failed. Moral pleas have been ignored. The lines have been drawn, invisible yet absolute. Lin Zexu has said no, with a strength that echoes through the annals of history. And then, from a harbor off the distant shores of Hong Kong, a sound pierces the air. Not the gentle lapping of waves, nor the familiar calls of merchants, but something new, something terrifying. The first cannon fire rings out, a deep, resonant boom that shatters the tranquility and heralds the end of a long peace. It is the sound of an empire's defiance meeting the brute force of a new world order. The quiet struggle has finally erupted into the thunder of war. The air, once still with tension, now reverberates with a sound that chills you to the bone, the deep, guttural roar of cannon fire. You stand on the coast, the ground trembling slightly beneath your feet, as the vast, unfamiliar shapes of British warships appear on the horizon, their sails billowing, their sleek forms cutting through the water with terrifying efficiency. This is the beginning of the First Opium War, a clash not just of nations, but of epics, where ancient traditions meet modern firepower. The year is 1839, and the dignity of the Middle Kingdom is about to face a brutal awakening. You watch, your heart heavy, as these formidable vessels approach China's coastal defenses. They are steel giants compared to China's traditional wooden junks, their hulls bristling with row upon row of massive cannons. The British strategy is clear and devastatingly effective: bypass the heavily defended Canton and instead strike at vulnerable island ports along the coastline. You see the ease with which they maneuver, their disciplined formations, a stark contrast to the less organized, more localized Chinese defenses. Imagine the despair that grips the local garrisons. You see Chinese forces, courageous and fiercely loyal, standing ready. They are armed with what they know: bows and arrows, their graceful arcs a symbol of a bygone era. You observe spears, their polished tips glinting in the sun, held by men whose strength lies in their martial arts and profound dedication. Small, antiquated cannons, often of limited range and accuracy, are rolled into position. Their training is based on centuries of tradition. Their tactics honed for a different kind of warfare, often against internal rebellions or less technologically advanced foes. But these British ships are a different beast entirely. You hear the deafening roar as their cannons unleash a volley of iron, tearing through the air with incredible velocity. The sound of solid shot ripping through wooden fortifications is sickening. Splintering timber, crumbling stone, creating craters in the earth. The impact is immediate and horrifying. Chinese bows and spears, formidable in close combat, are rendered utterly useless against this onslaught from a distance. You see the sheer terror in the eyes of the defenders, the realization that their bravery, their skill, their numbers mean little against this overwhelming, impersonal force. One by one, the island ports fall with chilling ease. You observe the smoking ruins of forts, the retreat of Chinese soldiers, their faces grim with the weight of defeat. The British warships, like predatorial sharks, move from one strategic point to another, establishing footholds along the coast. Each captured port is an erosion of China's sovereignty, a visible crack in the once impenetrable wall of the Middle Kingdom. The sense of invincibility, cultivated over millennia, begins to crumble under the relentless bombardment. The war progresses with a grim, methodical pace. The British, with their superior naval power and advanced weaponry, dictate the terms of engagement. They move north, their ships cutting through the waves, their aim set on key cities and waterways. You witness the constant movement of British troops, their red coats a stark contrast against the Chinese landscape, their formations precise and unyielding. The Chinese forces, despite sporadic acts of incredible bravery and desperate resistance, are consistently outmatched. Their communications are slower, their supplies less efficient, their leadership often hampered by a lack of understanding of this new kind of mechanized warfare. Finally, in the summer of 1842, the British forces reached Nanking, a strategically vital city, and lay siege. You hear the growing desperation in the city, the fear that settles over the population as the British approach. The fall of Nanking is a devastating blow, a symbol of China's vulnerability laid bare. The imperial court, reeling from continuous defeats, facing the potential capture of their capital if the British continued their advance, has no choice but to sue for peace. The silence of surrender descends, heavy and suffocating. And so, aboard a British warship, HMS Cornwallis, anchored off the coast of Nanking, a document is presented, a document that will forever alter the course of Chinese history. You imagine the somber faces of the Chinese delegates, the humiliation etched in their expressions as they confront the victorious British representatives. The air is thick with unspoken tension, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. This is the Treaty of Nanking. It is a treaty dictated by the victor, a stark reflection of the new power dynamic. The terms are clear, precise, and utterly uncompromising. You hear them read aloud, each clause a hammer blow to China's sovereignty. 5 new ports are to be opened for foreign trade, not just Canton, but Shanghai, Ningbo, Fuzhou, and Xiamen. These are not merely trading posts. They are gateways, flung open, allowing Western influence to flow unimpeded into the heart of China. Then, Hong Kong, a small island, geographically insignificant perhaps, but strategically vital, is to be ceded to Britain in perpetuity. You feel the sting of this loss, a tangible piece of the Middle Kingdom torn away. And finally, a crippling indemnity, vast sums of silver. Millions of dollars must be paid to Britain to cover the cost of the war and the confiscated opium. This is a staggering sum, a financial drain that will cripple China's treasury for years to come. As the ink dries on the parchment, you sense the profound injustice of it all. China, the defeated party, receives absolutely nothing in return. No concessions, no reciprocal benefits, no recognition of its long-standing cultural pride. It is a pure, unadulterated humiliation, a one-sided imposition of will. The dignity of centuries has been shattered, replaced by a bitter taste of defeat. The silence that follows the signing of the treaty is not one of peace, but a profound shock, a foreboding. This, you realize, is not just the end of a war. It is the beginning of something far more profound, far more enduring. It is the dawn of what would come to be known as China's century of humiliation, a period that would leave an indelible scar on the soul of a nation, a shadow that would stretch across generations. The sound of iron and fire may have faded, but the echoes of this injustice will resonate for a very long time, shaping the destiny of an empire. The ink on the Treaty of Nanking has long dried, but its consequences linger in the air like a persistent, unsettling mist. You sense a fundamental shift in the world around you, an alteration in the very fabric of China. The forced opening of those 5 treaty ports, Shanghai, Ningbo, Fuzhou, Xiamen, and Canton, is not merely about trade. It is about a deep and unsettling breach in the Middle Kingdom's ancient defenses. Where once there was a meticulously controlled gateway, there are now gaping holes through which a tide of foreign influence begins to surge. You observe the bustling activity in these new port cities. British merchants, no longer confined to the controlled enclaves of Canton, establish themselves with newfound confidence, their flags fluttering brazenly over their warehouses and residences. Soon, they are not alone. Like a ripple spreading across a calm pond, other Western powers take note of Britain's success. France, with its own colonial ambitions, soon demands similar trade privileges, mirroring the terms of the Treaty of Nanking. Then comes the United States, eager to assert its presence on the global stage, followed by Russia, seeking its own strategic advantages. Each new demand, each new treaty, chips away at China's sovereignty, further eroding its ability to control its own destiny. You feel the relentless push of these foreign powers. They demand not only trade, but also extraterritoriality, meaning their citizens, even when on Chinese soil, are subject only to their own laws, not to China's. This creates a profound sense of injustice, a deep resentment among the Chinese people. Imagine witnessing a foreign merchant commit a crime, only for them to walk free, untouchable by the very laws of the land they stand upon. It is a constant, grating reminder of China's weakened state, a subtle humiliation that permeates daily life. And perhaps the most devastating consequence, the persistent agony, is the worsening opium addiction. With the ports flung open and the British eager to continue their profitable trade, the flow of opium into China becomes a torrent. You see the silent toll it takes on society. Families crumble, their meager savings squandered on the drug. Villages become shadows of their former selves. Once industrious people, now listless, their lives consumed by the relentless craving. The sweet, sickly scent of opium smoke hangs heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the national malaise. You hear the coughs, the whispered laments, the profound sadness that blankets communities. It is a national sickness, draining not just wealth, but vitality and spirit from the Chinese people. Beyond the economic and social decay, you perceive a more subtle, yet equally profound, form of erosion. Western culture begins to creep in through China's weakened borders. You see the influx of foreign goods, foreign ideas, foreign missionaries. Churches rise alongside ancient temples. Western-style buildings appear amidst traditional Chinese architecture. While some embrace these new influences, many others view them with suspicion, as an unwelcome intrusion that threatens the very essence of their ancient way of life. The hum of tradition is slowly, almost imperceptibly, being altered by discordant notes from a foreign melody. The emperor and his court, burdened by indemnities and weakened by successive defeats, struggle to maintain control. The vast empire, once unified and outwardly impervious, begins to crack from within. The seeds of discontent, sown by poverty, corruption, and the humiliation of foreign domination, begin to sprout. You feel the simmering anger among the peasantry, the desperation that can ignite into open rebellion. And indeed, rebellions simmer, then erupt. The Taiping Rebellion, a massive civil war that will decimate the population and further destabilize the empire, begins its slow, devastating rise. You witness the growing unrest, the acts of defiance turning into widespread uprisings. The dynasty, once so proud and seemingly unshakable, finds itself besieged not only by external pressures, but by internal strife, its foundations cracking under the strain. The emperor, isolated in his magnificent palace, must feel the weight of a kingdom slowly slipping through his fingers, piece by agonizing piece. The very cohesion of the Middle Kingdom, its deep-seated sense of unity, is being torn apart. As the years pass, you sense the deepening shadow of humiliation, a despair that settles over the land. The initial shock of the First Opium War has given way to a bitter reality. China is no longer the undisputed center of the world. It is a nation vulnerable, exploited, and increasingly powerless against the relentless march of Western imperialism. The certainty of its long history is replaced by an unsettling uncertainty, a profound sense of being adrift in a rapidly changing world. But just a decade later, as the wounds from the first conflict are still festering, as the opium smoke continues to cloud the land, another incident occurs. A seemingly minor event, a spark in the darkness, but one that will once again ignite the fuse. The simmering tensions will explode anew, and the Middle Kingdom will once more be dragged into the crucible of war, facing an even stronger, more determined adversary. The hope for recovery will be brutally extinguished, and the century of humiliation will tighten its grip further. The interlude, a mere decade of fragile peace, has been a time of simmering resentment, of unhealed wounds. You feel the persistent weight of the Treaty of Nanking, the continuing drain of silver, the pervasive shadow of opium. The cracks in the empire, though momentarily patched, have never truly mended. And then, a small incident, seemingly insignificant, yet with the force of a powerful catalyst, ignites the fuse once more. It is 1856, and you are drawn to the harbor of Canton, a place where tensions perpetually linger. The focus of the new friction is a small Chinese-owned vessel, a lorcha named Arrow. This ship, though Chinese-owned, had at one point been registered in Hong Kong and thus flew the British flag. The Chinese authorities, suspecting it of piracy and smuggling, board the ship and arrest its Chinese crew members. In a moment of profound misjudgment, they also pulled down the British flag. This act, the lowering of the British ensign, is seized upon by the British consul, Harry Parkes, as a grave insult, a blatant violation of international law. He demands the immediate release of the crew and an apology. You sense the manufactured outrage, the convenient pretext for a deeper agenda. The British, still eager to expand their trade access and secure more concessions, see this as an opportune moment to press their advantage. The French, too, find a reason to join the fray, citing the murder of a French missionary in China as their own casus belli. And so, Britain and France return to China's shores, not with the hesitant probes of the First War, but with a renewed, formidable might. You observe their fleets, larger, more technologically advanced, their forces better organized and more ruthless than before. The dread that sweeps through the coastal cities is palpable. It is a sense of history repeating itself, but with an even greater force of destruction. Canton, the city that has become synonymous with China's struggle against opium, falls again. You witness the relentless bombardment, the terror as shells rain down, reducing ancient buildings to rubble. The defenses, still inadequate against modern artillery, crumble swiftly. The city is occupied, its people subjected to the harsh realities of foreign military rule. The occupation of Canton is a stark symbol of China's inability to protect its own territory, a deepening wound in the national psyche. As the war progresses, the British and French forces press their demands, pushing deeper into Chinese territory. The Chinese government, still reeling from the internal chaos of the Taiping Rebellion, finds itself caught between two overwhelming forces, struggling to fight a civil war and a foreign invasion simultaneously. You feel the immense pressure on the Qing court, the agonizing choices they face. In 1858, facing inevitable defeat, China is forced to sign yet another humiliating accord, the Treaty of Tientsin. You watch the ceremony, a display of power imbalance. The terms are even more devastating than those of Nanking. This new treaty legalizes the opium trade throughout China, a shocking capitulation to the very poison that has ravaged the nation. You hear the despair among the officials, the bitter irony of formalizing the drug trade that has caused so much suffering. 10 more treaty ports are opened, pushing Western influence even deeper into the interior of China. Turning a trickle into a flood, foreign legations are permitted in Beijing, placing foreign powers directly at the heart of the imperial capital. A direct challenge to China's traditional sovereignty. Foreign missionaries are given the right to travel freely throughout China, spreading Western religion and culture into even the remotest villages. The Chinese government, recognizing the profound implications of these terms, particularly the legalization of opium, balks at implementing the treaty. They attempt to negotiate, to find a way to mitigate the damage, to salvage some semblance of national pride. But the Allied powers, relentless in their pursuit of dominance, will tolerate no delay, no compromise. You sense the growing impatience among the British and French, their determination to enforce their will by any means necessary. And so, when China refuses to implement the treaty as demanded, the Allied forces advance directly on Beijing. This is an unprecedented act, a direct assault on the imperial capital, the symbolic heart of the Middle Kingdom. You hear the sounds of their march, the rhythmic beat of their drums, a relentless progression towards the Forbidden City. The emperor and his court are forced to make an agonizing decision. The sanctity of the capital, the spiritual and political center of China, is now under direct threat. The war, which began with a small flag, is now poised to bring unthinkable devastation to the most sacred places of an ancient empire. And what happens next is not just a military conquest. It is a profound act of cultural erasure. A blow that will echo through generations, leaving an indelible scar on the soul of China. The dignity of centuries will be incinerated, leaving behind only ashes and a lingering, bitter silence. The relentless march of the Anglo-French troops towards Beijing casts a long, chilling shadow. You feel the tremor of fear that courses through the imperial capital, a dread that something truly sacred is about to be violated. The Forbidden City, the ancient heart of power, lies exposed. But before they reach its hallowed gates, the foreign forces turn their attention to a place of unparalleled beauty and cultural significance, the imperial palaces and gardens outside Beijing. Particularly the magnificent Yuanmingyuan, the old summer palace. Imagine, if you will, the splendor of Yuanmingyuan. It was not a single palace, but a vast complex of exquisite gardens, lakes, pavilions, and temples. A masterpiece of landscape design and architectural brilliance. It was a place of contemplation, of artistic endeavor, of imperial retreat. Priceless treasures beyond measure were housed within its walls: ancient bronzes, delicate jade carvings, magnificent porcelain, rare books, unique paintings, and historical artifacts collected over centuries. Each piece held a story, a connection to the long and glorious history of China. You watch with a sense of horror as the Anglo-French troops storm these sacred grounds. This is not simply a military objective. It is an act of deliberate desecration, a systematic looting. You hear the sounds of smashing porcelain, the rip of silk, the heavy thud of stolen bronzes being carried away. The soldiers, driven by greed and a sense of entitlement, ransack the pavilions, stripping them bare of their contents. Priceless treasures, irreplaceable artifacts representing millennia of Chinese artistry and history, are stolen, carried off as spoils of war. You can almost feel the cold emptiness left behind, the hollow echo in the grand halls. Amidst the chaos and plunder, a small, poignant detail emerges. In the ruins of one of the pillaged palaces, a small Pekingese dog is discovered, a tiny, furry creature, bewildered and alone amidst the destruction. This dog is taken as a curiosity, a living souvenir of the conquest, and later gifted to Queen Victoria herself. She names it Looty. The very name, though seemingly innocuous, carries a chilling irony, a testament to the scale of the plundering, a small, living symbol of what was lost. But the desecration does not end with looting. Lord Elgin, the British High Commissioner to China, driven by a desire for retribution for the torture and deaths of some British and French prisoners, issues a devastating order. His target is the Summer Palace, Yuanmingyuan, itself. The command is chillingly simple: burn it. Not for strategic military gain, but as a punitive act, a symbolic blow to the heart of Chinese pride. You witness the horrifying spectacle. Flames erupt, licking at ancient wooden structures, consuming intricate carvings, turning centuries of history into ash. The smoke billows into the sky, a dark pall hanging over Beijing, a stark monument to destruction. The heat is immense, the crackling of the fire a terrifying symphony of ruin. You see the despair on the faces of the Chinese onlookers, their helplessness as their heritage, their history, is incinerated before their very eyes. The vibrant colors of the gardens turn to a desolate gray. The delicate bridges crumble. The serene lakes reflect only smoke and fire. It is an act of profound cultural violence, a deliberate attempt to break the spirit of a nation. The emperor, Xianfeng, in a state of shock and profound distress, has already fled Beijing with his court, unable to bear witness to the destruction of his ancestral home. His brother, Prince Gong, is left behind to face the foreign powers and negotiate peace under the most agonizing circumstances, under the shadow of the burning palace, under the weight of utter defeat. Prince Gong is forced to sign the Convention of Peking. This treaty, negotiated amidst the smoke and ashes, is another hammer blow. China is compelled to surrender even more territory, including the Kowloon Peninsula adjacent to Hong Kong. New ports are opened, further cementing foreign control. And, perhaps most cruelly, opium is now fully legalized throughout China. The very poison that sparked these wars, that brought so much suffering, is now officially sanctioned. Its trade no longer clandestine, but openly permitted. Its shadow stretching across the entire empire. As the fires of the Summer Palace slowly die down, leaving behind a smoldering silence, you are left with a profound sense of loss. A proud dynasty, its ancestral home reduced to ruins, stands utterly humiliated. A nation, once so self-assured, now finds itself stripped bare, its people increasingly addicted to a foreign substance, its cultural treasures plundered. This, you realize, is not merely the end of a war. It is a deep, searing wound that will fester for generations. A silent scream echoing through the ashes. And the worst, the long, slow, agonizing aftermath, is yet to come. The smoke from the burning Summer Palace eventually dissipates, but its acrid scent seems to linger in the air, a phantom reminder of profound loss. You feel the heavy silence that descends upon the empire, a resignation that follows such a devastating series of defeats and humiliations. The impact of the Opium Wars and the subsequent treaties is not a fleeting event. It is a deep, pervasive wound that begins to fester, subtly reshaping the destiny of a vast civilization. The emperor, Xianfeng, who had fled Beijing as his beloved Summer Palace burned, died soon after. You sense the profound irony, the tragedy of his fate. He, too, succumbed to the very addiction that had brought his empire to its knees. Opium. His death, hastened by the drug, serves as a poignant, personal symbol of the national malaise, a testament to the pervasive grip of the poppy. His passing leaves a void, and a long regency follows, marked by infighting and instability, further weakening the already fragile Qing dynasty. The empire, already reeling from external pressures, now faces an internal cataclysm, the Taiping Rebellion, a civil war of unprecedented scale. erupts and rages across China for over a decade. You witness the devastation millions upon millions perish, not just from direct conflict, but from famine, disease, and societal breakdown. Vast swaths of the countryside are ravaged, cities are destroyed, and the central government's authority is further eroded. This internal strife, fueled by poverty and discontent, further weakens the empire, making it even more vulnerable to the encroaching Western powers. The fabric of daily life is torn apart, replaced by chaos and uncertainty. But the most pervasive and insidious scar left by the Opium Wars is the widespread addiction that ravages the population. With opium legalized and its trade flourishing, the drug seeps into every corner of Chinese society. You see generations burdened by its curse, the desperation in the eyes of the addicts, the slow, agonizing decline of once vibrant individuals, the silent suffering of their families. It is a national health crisis, a profound social ill that drains the vitality and productivity from the Chinese people. The imperial government, weakened and preoccupied with internal rebellions and external threats, proves largely incapable of effectively combating the epidemic. The hum of life is replaced by the dull ache of addiction. This blight, this silent plague, continues its devastating course for nearly a century. From the mid-19th century through the early 20th century, opium addiction remains a widespread and crippling problem in China. You can almost feel the weight of this prolonged suffering. The generations lost to the drug's insidious grip. It is a testament to the sheer depth of the problem, a silent testament to the long shadow cast by the Opium Wars. It is not until the mid-20th century, amidst yet another period of seismic change and revolution, that the opium era finally comes to a brutal, decisive end. Under the iron will of Mao Zedong and the newly established communist government, a series of ruthless purges are initiated. You hear the absolute finality of these actions, swift, unforgiving measures taken against drug traffickers and users. The addiction, which had brought such despair and humiliation for so long, is forcibly eradicated through draconian means. It is a harsh and violent end, but an end nonetheless, to a chapter of profound national suffering. Yet, even after the opium fields are burned, the pipes shattered, and the trade suppressed, the scars remain. They are not merely the physical scars of war, though those are evident in the ruined forts and the desecrated palaces. More profoundly, they are the deep, psychological scars on the national psyche. The memories of the Opium Wars, of the forced treaties, of the cultural humiliation, leave an indelible mark. You sense these scars in the pride of a nation that remembers its humiliation, but also its resilience. They are the scars of sovereignty lost, of self-sufficiency shattered, of an ancient worldview irrevocably altered. They are the echoes of a period when a proud empire was broken, not just by thundering cannons, but by the insidious tendrils of smoke, the relentless flow of silver, and the profound silence of surrender. As the night deepens and the world outside grows still, you are left with a lingering reflection. The story of China's greatest empire, brought low not by a conquering army in a single decisive battle, but by a gradual, insidious erosion, serves as a quiet reminder, a reminder of the complex interplay of power, profit, and poison, a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes begin not with a roar, but with a whisper, with a delicate flower, and with the persistent drip of a nation's wealth and spirit being siphoned away. And perhaps, somewhere in the quiet echoes of history, there are lessons to be learned from those lingering shadows. Let the silence of the night hold these thoughts as you drift into a peaceful slumber.
Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a place whispered about in legends, a ribbon of dust stretching across the known world, the Silk Road. The name conjures images of camels silhouetted against setting suns, of exotic goods and faraway lands. But what if I told you it was never just one road? What if it was something far more intricate? A vast, breathing network of connections woven across continents. Stay with us as we journey, not just across a map, but into the heart of this incredible, complex web. You stand on the edge of the known world, or at least, your known world. The air here feels different. It carries the scent of something foreign, maybe distant spices, maybe just the dry dust of lands you've never seen. The sun is low, casting long, weary shadows across the ground. You've heard the whispers, the stories, the tales of the Great Silk Road. You pictured a single path, perhaps wide enough for a few wagons, well trodden and clear. But as you look out, what you see isn't a single road. It's 1,000 possibilities. It's not a line, but a tangled, sprawling network. You see faint tracks winding away in multiple directions, disappearing over low hills and into the hazy distance. You see the glint of water suggesting river routes, the distant promise of ports hinting at sea journeys. This is the first truth the road reveals to you. It's not a single entity, but a vast interconnected system, a web spun across thousands of miles, linking the very edges of the world you inhabit, places you can barely imagine. Think of a spider web, intricate and strong, catching the light just so. This ancient network is like that, but on a scale that dwarfs any single creature's making. From the bustling, vibrant cities deep in the heart of China, across formidable mountain ranges whose peaks scrape the sky, through vast, silent deserts where the only sound is the wind, and across shimmering seas. These routes stretch. They flow westward, ever westward, towards lands you know only by rumour, Persia, Arabia, and eventually, the distant fabled shores of the Mediterranean Sea, the gateway to Rome. You're standing at one of the myriad nodes in this web. Perhaps you're in a small oasis town, a brief respite before the long trek. Perhaps you're in a mountain pass, the thin air biting at your lungs, the view of winding paths below both daunting and exhilarating. Wherever you are, you feel the immensity of this network surrounding you. It's not just a physical presence, it's a feeling, an energy carried on the wind, a sense of connection to unseen places and unknown people. The name Silk Road is beautiful, isn't it? It rolls off the tongue, evoking images of smooth, lustrous fabric, a treasure fit for kings. And yes, silk was incredibly important, a driving force for much of this exchange. But the second truth quickly becomes clear. This network wasn't solely about silk. The name is too simple, too narrow for the incredible diversity that flowed along these pathways. It was about so much more. It was about survival, about curiosity, about the relentless human urge to connect, to trade, to see what lies beyond the next horizon. Look closer at the ground beneath your feet. It's not just dirt. It's mixed with grit from 1,000 different places. Perhaps a dropped seed from a tree that grows only miles away. A pebble polished smooth by the souls of countless travellers. A fragment of clay from a dropped pot. This ground holds the silent history of footsteps from generations past. Merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, scholars, dreamers. Each footfall adding another layer to the story. Another strand to this ancient web. The routes themselves weren't static. They shifted, they changed. Sometimes a river would flood, forcing a new path. Sometimes bandits would make a stretch too dangerous, diverting caravans to a longer, safer route. Sometimes political changes would open up new territories or close off old ones. The web was alive, constantly adapting, breathing with the pulse of empires rising and falling, of seasons changing, of human needs and fears. As you gaze out at the landscape, knowing that it represents not a single destination, but a million interwoven journeys, you begin to understand the true nature of the Silk Road. It wasn't a paved highway built by a single power. It was an organic creation, born of necessity and opportunity, shaped by geography, climate, and the unyielding spirit of those who dared to traverse it. It was a testament to the idea that the world, vast and intimidating as it seemed, could be connected, one step, one camel ride, one boat journey at a time. You're now part of that web, a single thread in an epic tapestry woven across centuries and continents. The journey begins not on a single road, but within the heart of this intricate ancient network. Feel the weight of responsibility settle onto your shoulders. You are a trader, a merchant, a member of a caravan preparing for a long journey. The air around you hums with activity, the low grumbling of camels, the shouted commands in languages you might not fully understand, the clinking of coins, the smell of animal hides and packed goods. Why are you here? Why are so many people risking their lives, their fortunes, to travel these dangerous routes? The answer, in part, lies with power. Look up. You might see the banner of an empire fluttering in the wind. From the mighty Han Dynasty in the east, with its vast, organised bureaucracy and insatiable demand for resources and prestige, stretching all the way to the distant legendary Roman Empire in the west, with its legions and its hunger for luxury goods from faraway lands. Empires fueled this trade. They built infrastructure sometimes, offered protection sometimes, and most importantly, they created the stability and the demand necessary for large-scale trade to flourish. Your journey, in some small way, is driven by the ambitions of emperors and kings you will likely never meet, their desire for wealth, for exotic goods, for control, creates the environment in which you can make your living. But empires aren't just sources of stability, they're also sources of complication, borders. Feel the tension in the air as your caravan approaches a frontier. It's not a simple line on a map, it's a fortified gate, suspicious guards, customs officials demanding tariffs and bribes. The flow of goods, which seems so natural, can be abruptly halted or heavily taxed simply because you're moving from one ruler's territory to another. You must negotiate, persuade, perhaps even pay extra to pass through. These borders aren't just lines, they are friction points, slowing down the movement, adding cost and risk to your journey. And then there are the horses, or more likely, the camels. Feel the rough texture of the camel hair, the powerful rhythmic sway as they walk. Horses were magnificent, symbols of status, and fast for their time, but it was often the humble camel, the ship of the desert, that made the longest, most arduous stretches possible. Feel the heat radiating from the sand, the relentless sun beating down. Hear the mournful cries of the camels, the creak of their saddles, the quiet padding of their feet. Your survival, your livelihood, depends utterly on these animals. You care for them, feed them, rely on their strength and endurance to carry your precious cargo across vast, unforgiving landscapes. Between the empires, between the borders, lies the wilderness, and in that wilderness, danger lurks. Feel the unease as dusk falls and your caravan makes camp. You post guards, huddle together for warmth and safety. The wind carries whispers that might just be the desert air. or they might be the sound of unseen figures approaching. Bandits. They prey on the wealth that flows along these routes, targeting vulnerable caravans. The fear is a constant companion on the longer stretches. You carry weapons, you stay vigilant, you travel in large groups for protection, but the risk is always there, a cold knot in your stomach during the long nights. And the deserts. Feel the dry air crack your lips, the sand sting your eyes when the wind picks up. The heat during the day can be unbearable, the cold at night profound. The lack of water is a constant worry. You measure your life in waterskins. Every well, every oasis is a victory, a moment of profound relief. These aren't just empty spaces on a map. They are formidable, life-threatening barriers that must be overcome with careful planning, endurance, and sheer determination. Because of these obstacles, the borders, the bandits, the deserts, the typical journey wasn't like travelling from one city to another in your own land. You didn't pack up your goods in Xi'an and drive your wagon all the way to Rome. That was simply not feasible. The scale was too vast, the dangers too great, the logistics too complex. Instead, this grand journey was broken down into countless smaller legs. Imagine passing a baton in a relay race. Your caravan might travel from one major trading city to the next, perhaps a journey of a few hundred miles, maybe 1,000. At that city, you would rest, perhaps trade some of your goods, and then, crucially, other merchants would take over. Feel the bustle of the market in this transit city. Hear the cacophony of languages, the smell of exotic foods, the sight of people from different lands with different clothes, different faces. You sell your goods here, or perhaps you buy goods brought from farther east to take a leg westward. You're a crucial link in a very long chain. The goods themselves pass from hand to hand, city to city, caravan to caravan. It is this relay system, this passing of the baton, that truly defines how the Silk Road functioned. You're not a lone runner carrying the message the entire distance. You're one vital member of a vast interconnected team, each carrying the precious cargo just a portion of the way. Your segment matters, but it is only one part of an epic, multi-generational journey. Step into the heart of a bustling caravanserai market. The air is thick with the scent of spices, the noise of bartering, the murmur of a dozen different languages swirling around you. This is where the relay happens. Feel the energy, the controlled chaos of exchange. Your goods, carefully transported across the last leg of the journey, are now being assessed by potential buyers. You're not selling directly to the final consumer thousands of miles away. You're selling to a middleman. Imagine a bolt of silk, shimmering even in the dim light of a warehouse. It began its journey far to the east, perhaps carried by a merchant from a small village near the silk farms. He sold it in a regional market. From there, a larger merchant, perhaps from a city like Samarkand, bought it. He added it to his caravan and travelled west across the Pamir Mountains. In a city like Bukhara, he sold it to another merchant, perhaps a Sogdian trader who specialised in the westward routes. This Sogdian trader might carry it through Persia, selling it in a major centre like Ctesiphon. There, it could be bought by an Arab merchant heading towards the Levant, or a Persian merchant with connections to ports on the Mediterranean, and so on and so on. Feel the texture of a foreign coin in your hand. You're trading not just goods, but currencies, weights, and measures that are unfamiliar. Each exchange point, each new city, meant a potential change in ownership. Your precious cargo might change hands not just once, but dozens of times before it reached its final destination. Feel the tension as negotiations take place. The price you sell it here is influenced by the price the previous merchant paid, and it will influence the price the next merchant demands. Fortunes were made in these exchanges by merchants who understood the markets, who knew when to buy and when to sell, who could navigate the complex web of connections. These middlemen were the lifeblood of the relay system. They weren't just simple traders. They were entrepreneurs, risk-takers, cultural brokers. They spoke multiple languages, essential for dealing with people from different regions. They understood different customs, different legal systems, or lack thereof. They had networks of contacts, family members or business partners stationed in cities hundreds or even thousands of miles apart. Feel the respect, or perhaps the suspicion, in the eyes of the merchants around you. They are sizing you up, assessing your goods, calculating the risk and the potential profit. Think about the information that flowed through these middlemen: news of prices in faraway markets, reports of dangers on certain routes, whispers of political changes that could impact trade. This information was as valuable as the goods themselves. A merchant who knew that the price of spices had spiked in Alexandria could make a fortune by rushing a shipment westward. A merchant who heard about bandits on a southern route could choose a safer, northern path, even if it was longer. This network of information, passed along through conversations in caravanserais and markets, was crucial for survival and success. But with complexity comes risk. The relay system, while enabling trade across vast distances, also created opportunities for deception. Feel the wary glance you give a merchant whose reputation you don't know. Goods could be adulterated, weights could be manipulated, descriptions could be misleading. A bale of silk might look perfect on the outside, but contain damaged fabric within. A jar of spices might be cut with cheaper fillers. Fraud was an ever-present danger in this system where trust was paramount but difficult to verify across long chains of middlemen. You learn to inspect goods carefully, to rely on the reputations of established merchants, to trust your instincts. The system meant that no single merchant bore the entire risk or reaped the entire profit of a journey from start to finish. Instead, the risk and the reward were distributed across many hands. This made the system resilient. If one merchant failed or a single caravan was lost, the entire flow of goods wasn't necessarily stopped. Other merchants would pick up the slack. Other routes would be used. It was a distributed network, robust precisely because of its fragmented nature. As you complete your transaction, passing your goods into the hands of the next middleman, you feel a sense of closure for this leg of the journey, but also a sense of distance from the final destination of your goods. You may never know where that bolt of silk or that sack of spices ultimately ends up, who wears the dress or flavours the meal. Your role was to move it from here to there, to be a link in the chain, and in doing so, you are contributing to the incredible, complex, and often opaque flow of goods, wealth, and information that defined the relay trade system of the Silk Road. You have played your part as a crucial middleman in this ancient global economy. Lift a bundle of goods onto your camel's back. It feels heavy, substantial. Perhaps it's not silk this time. You know, from your experience on these routes, that while silk is the most famous export from the East, it's far from the only one, and perhaps not even the most impactful. The true wealth flowing along these paths was incredibly diverse, a vibrant mix of the exotic and the essential. Feel the smooth coolness of jade, this precious stone, carved into intricate objects or valued for its purity, travelled westward, prized by elites in distant lands. Imagine the skill required to work it, the patient artistry. Now, feel the delicate lightness of paper. This revolutionary invention, originating in China, slowly made its way west, changing how people recorded information, how knowledge was spread. Think of the contrast, the heavy, ancient stone and the fragile and modern material, both moving along the same routes. Smell the pungent aroma of spices. This is where immense fortunes were often made. Cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, pepper. These weren't just flavourings, they were preservatives, medicines, status symbols. Imagine the long journey of a peppercorn, picked in India or Southeast Asia, making its way through myriad hands, its value increasing exponentially with every mile it travelled westward. The scent alone tells a story of distant lands and dangerous journeys. You might carry sacks of it, the smell filling your nostrils for weeks on end. Look at the gleam of glassware. Glassmaking traditions in the West, particularly in places like Syria and Egypt, were highly developed. Their exquisite glass vessels, beads, and ornaments travelled eastward, desired for their beauty and craftsmanship in courts far from where they were made. Imagine holding a delicate glass bottle, marvelling at its transparency and form, knowing it has travelled thousands of miles against the general flow of Eastern goods. Hear the soft murmur of voices around the campfire. Among the goods were also living things. Horses, particularly fine breeds from Central Asia, were highly sought after by armies and nobility across the continent. Feel the power of a well-bred horse, its muscles rippling under its skin. And sadly, feel the weight of sorrow for another type of cargo slaves. People, too, were traded along these routes, a harsh reminder of the complex and often brutal realities of this interconnected world. But perhaps the most significant, though intangible, cargo was knowledge. Imagine sitting with a traveller from a different land, sharing stories, comparing beliefs, describing technologies. Ideas flowed just as freely as goods. Buddhist monks travelled from India to China, spreading their faith and translating scriptures. Scholars exchanged astronomical observations, medical theories, philosophical concepts, agricultural techniques, like new methods of irrigation or different crops, moved between regions. Feel the spark of understanding, the broadening of your perspective as you encounter new ways of thinking, new stories about the world. This exchange of knowledge-shaped cultures spurred innovation and connected minds across vast distances. This vibrant mix of tangible goods and intangible ideas created a dynamic, ever-changing flow. It wasn't just silk moving one way, it was a two-way street, a complex current with goods and ideas flowing in all directions, constantly mixing and transforming the cultures they touched. However, this interconnectedness also had a darker side, an unseen passenger travelling alongside the spices and silk. Imagine the cough of a fellow traveller, the fever that spreads through a camp. Alongside commerce and culture came bacteria, viruses, diseases. As people from different regions mixed more frequently, so too did the pathogens they carried. The Silk Road facilitated the spread of illnesses, connecting outbreaks in one area to vulnerable populations thousands of miles away. It's a quiet, almost imperceptible part of the exchange, but its impact could be devastating, a somber reminder that connection brings both wonders and challenges. As you pack your goods, whether it's fine porcelain from the east, fragrant spices from the south, or shimmering glass from the west, you know you're carrying more than just objects. You're carrying pieces of distant lands, embodiments of different cultures, vessels of stories and knowledge. You're participating in a vast ancient exchange that moved the material wealth of the world, yes, but also its ideas, its beliefs, and its very lifeblood, for better and sometimes for worse. These are the real treasures of the Silk Road, carried not just by camel, but by the hands, the minds, and the bodies of the people who travelled its paths. Look around you in the market, or at your fellow travellers huddled by the fire. See the faces. They are not all from the great empires at either end of the route. Many come from the lands in between, the regions that lay nestled between the Han Dynasty, the Persian empires, the Roman world. These lands, like the fertile valleys of Central Asia, the kingdoms bordering the deserts, the cities along the oases, were not just transit points. They were vibrant centres of culture and commerce in their own right, and the people who lived there, or who made their living traversing the gaps, were the true architects of the Silk Road's functionality. Feel the resilience emanating from them. They are the Sogdian traders, masters of negotiation and language, whose trade networks stretched across Asia for centuries. Hear them speaking in multiple tongues, effortlessly switching between Persian, Sogdian, Chinese, and others, depending on who they are dealing with. They were the middlemen par excellence, building trust and connections across cultural divides. Imagine their caravans, often large and well organised, carrying goods and news across immense distances. See the quiet determination in the eyes of a Nestorian monk. Christianity, in its Nestorian form, travelled eastward along the Silk Road, carried by missionaries and merchants. These monks established communities, built churches, and translated religious texts. They weren't seeking material wealth, but spiritual connection. Yet their journeys were intertwined with the economic flows. Feel the sense of purpose that drives them on their long, difficult pilgrimages. Listen to the flow of conversation between people who might otherwise never meet. The interpreters were vital. Imagine trying to buy spices or sell silk when you don't share a language. These skilled individuals bridge the communication gap, making complex negotiations possible. Their ability to understand and convey meaning across linguistic barriers was fundamental to the entire system. These people of the in-between lands were often adaptable, flexible, and pragmatic. They had to be. They lived in regions where empires rose and fell, where borders shifted, where alliances changed like the desert wind. They couldn't rely on the stable backing of a single, distant empire. They relied on their wits, their networks, their ability to navigate uncertainty, feel the edge of alertness, the constant assessment of risk and opportunity that is etched into their demeanour. They held diverse beliefs. Along the Silk Road travelled not just goods, but religions, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, Christianity, Islam. Followers of these faiths lived and travelled side by side, sometimes in harmony, sometimes with friction, but always interacting. You might share a meal with a Buddhist monk one night, and a Zoroastrian merchant the next. Feel the complexity of this spiritual landscape, where ancient beliefs mingled with new doctrines, where people found solace and meaning in different ways. Their identity was often fluid. A Sogdian merchant might live for years in a Chinese city, adopting local customs and even language, yet maintaining ties to his homeland and his wider trading network. A Persian interpreter might serve different rulers and different merchants throughout his life, his loyalty tied more to his profession and his ability to survive than to a single state. Feel the sense of being a citizen of the road itself, belonging perhaps less to a fixed place and more to the transient community of travellers and traders. They made their living on uncertainty. Every journey was a gamble. Would you find buyers for your goods? Would you encounter bandits? Would disease strike your caravan? Would a political upheaval close the route ahead? The people who thrived on the Silk Road were those who could manage these risks, who were willing to embrace the unpredictable nature of the life, feel the mixture of excitement and apprehension that comes with setting out on a new journey, never knowing exactly what lies ahead. You are one of these people, or perhaps you're simply encountering them, seeing the world through their eyes for a brief moment. You see that the grand historical narratives of empires often miss the vital role played by the individuals and communities who operated in the spaces between those powers. The Silk Road didn't function because emperors decreed it. It functioned because millions of individuals, driven by necessity, ambition, faith, or curiosity, were willing to undertake the difficult, dangerous, and often tedious work of moving goods, ideas, and themselves across immense distances. These were the true inheritors and keepers of the road, the people who knitted the world together, one step, one negotiation, one shared story at a time. Feel the exhaustion deep in your bones. You've been travelling for days, perhaps weeks. The sun has been relentless, the wind biting, the landscape unchanging and vast. Your muscles ache, your throat is dry, and the constant vigilance against danger has frayed your nerves. But then, on the horizon, you see it. A shape emerges from the shimmering heat haze or the dusky twilight. Walls. A solid, rectangular structure standing alone in the wilderness. A caravanserai. A wave of profound relief washes over you. This is more than just an inn. It is a sanctuary. Feel the quickening pace of your steps, the renewed energy in the caravan as you approach the gates. This fortified structure, built of stone or mud brick, is designed for survival. Its thick walls offer protection from bandits and the elements. Inside, there is the promise of water, rest, and safety. Step through the massive gate and into the central courtyard. Hear the symphony of sounds, the lowing of camels settling down, the clatter of cooking pots, the chatter of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of travellers in various languages. Smell the mix of animal dung, wood smoke from cooking fires, the aroma of food, perhaps stew, fresh bread, or brewing tea. See the different faces, the diverse attire, the weary but hopeful expressions. You have arrived. Find a place for your animals in the stable area lining the walls of the courtyard. Feel the rough straw beneath your hands as you tend to them. They too are weary, their flanks heaving after the long journey. Their well-being is paramount. They are your transport and your wealth. Above the stables are small rooms, cells for the travellers. Find your spot. Feel the rough texture of the wall, the simple mat or blanket that serves as your bed. It is not luxurious, but it is shelter, solid and secure. In the centre of the courtyard, there is often a well or a cistern. Hear the splash of water, the creak of the bucket. Feel the coolness of the water as you drink deeply, washing away the dust and the dryness of the road. This water is life itself in these arid regions. As evening falls, fires are lit in the courtyard. Gather around a fire with your fellow travellers, share food, share stories, hear the tales of the road, of close calls with bandits, of sandstorms narrowly survived, of profitable trades made in distant cities, of wonders seen along the way. Feel the camaraderie that develops among those who share the risks of the journey. You're strangers, perhaps from different lands with different beliefs, but here, in the safety of the caravanserai walls, you're united by the shared experience of the road. These weren't just places to sleep, they were vital nodes in the network. They were places to resupply, to get repairs done, to exchange information about the routes ahead, to find guides or companions for the next leg. Merchants would buy and sell goods here, adding another layer to the relay trade. Feel the subtle undercurrent of business even amidst the rest. But the caravanserai was also a stark reminder of the dangers outside. Look out at the dark sky through the open gate. Beyond those walls lies the wilderness, the unknown. You hear stories of those who didn't make it. Some caravans vanished without a trace, perhaps lost to sandstorms so fierce they could bury entire groups. Others were ambushed by bandits, their wealth stolen, their lives taken. The desert, the mountains, the treacherous passes, they claimed their toll. Feel a shiver, not just from the night air, but from the quiet acknowledgement of the fragility of life on these routes. You sleep within the caravanserai. The sounds of your fellow travellers and their animals a comforting presence outside your small room. For a night or two, perhaps longer, you are safe, sheltered, revitalised, but the rest is temporary. The journey must continue. Soon, the gate will open again, and you will step back out into the vast, unpredictable world. As you prepare to leave the next morning, the memory of those who didn't survive lingers. They are the silent history of the road, Their stories carried only in the hushed tales told around the fires of caravanserais. You check your supplies, tighten the saddle on your camel, exchange farewells or nods with those staying behind or heading in a different direction. The caravanserai fades behind you as you move forward, a beacon of safety left in your wake. You carry with you the rest it provided and the quiet understanding that survival on the Silk Road was never guaranteed, that each successful arrival at a caravanserai was a small victory against the vast, indifferent wilderness. Imagine a period, a historical moment that feels almost mythical in its scale and reach. For a stretch of time, under the vast umbrella of the Mongol Empire, the world felt smaller, more connected than it ever had before. Step into this era. Feel the difference in the air. The fear of bandits, while never entirely absent, is lessened. The borders, while they still exist in some form, are overseen by a single, overarching power. The routes feel, for a time, more open, more secure. This period, sometimes called the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace, wasn't a time of perfect harmony, but it was a time of unprecedented order and relative stability across a massive swathe of Asia. Imagine the sheer scale of the empire, stretching from Eastern Europe all the way across Asia to the Pacific Ocean. Within these borders, the Great Khan's authority, however distant, provided a framework for trade and travel that was previously unimaginable. Hear the sound of horses' hooves pounding the earth. The Mongols relied on swift communication and movement. They established a sophisticated courier system, the Yam, with relay stations positioned regularly along the major routes. Imagine a messenger galloping past you, carrying official dispatches or vital information, able to cover hundreds of miles in a matter of days. For a merchant, this meant information travelled faster, making markets more predictable and journeys easier to coordinate. Feel the relative ease with which you can travel from city to city across different regions. A merchant from Beijing could, theoretically, travel all the way to Baghdad without leaving lands under Mongol influence or control. This vast interconnectedness facilitated not just trade, but the movement of people of all kinds: scholars, artists, missionaries, diplomats, adventurers. They traversed the continent with a degree of freedom that was extraordinary for the time. Feel the sense of wonder meeting people from lands you've only heard of in legends, their cultures and languages so different. Yet here you are, sharing the same road, the same caravanserai. The flow of goods intensified. Imagine markets overflowing with products from every corner of the vast empire and beyond. Chinese porcelain alongside Persian miniatures, Russian furs next to Indian textiles, Italian jewellery traded for Central Asian lapis lazuli. The volume and variety of trade reached new heights. Fortunes were made, not just by the Mongol rulers who taxed this trade, but by the merchants who navigated its networks. Feel the energy of these supercharged markets, the sheer abundance of goods from a connected world. The exchange of ideas also accelerated. Technologies and knowledge flowed rapidly across the empire. Chinese innovations like gunpowder or printing and the compass made their way westward, eventually transforming Europe. Astronomical knowledge from the Islamic world reached China. Medical understanding, artistic styles, philosophical debates, all were shared and disseminated across this vast, interconnected realm. Feel your own understanding expanding, encountering new ideas that challenge and enrich your view of the world. But this unprecedented interconnectedness, while fostering prosperity and cultural exchange, also had a hidden, terrible consequence. Remember the unseen passengers mentioned earlier, as people, goods, and ideas travelled more freely and frequently than ever before. So too did diseases. The very routes that facilitated the flow of wealth and knowledge also became highways for pathogens. Imagine the cough that begins subtly in a distant land, carried by a traveller or a flea hidden in a bale of goods. It moves, step by step, caravan by caravan, spreading through the dense populations gathered in cities and caravanserais along the routes. This period of open borders and rapid travel opened the floodgates not just for desirable goods, but for devastating plagues. Feel the chilling understanding that the same forces that brought prosperity could also bring unimaginable suffering. The most infamous example, the Black Death, which ravaged Eurasia in the mid-14th century, is believed to have spread rapidly along these well-established trade routes, a horrific consequence of a newly connected world. So, while you might enjoy the relative safety and ease of travel during this time, while you might marvel at the diversity of goods and people you encounter, there is also a quiet knowledge of the risk. The Pax Mongolica brought order, yes, but it also inadvertently created a pathway for death on an unimaginable scale. It's a complex legacy, a reminder that globalization, even in its ancient forms, carries both immense benefits and profound, often unintended costs. You travel under a vast peace, but carry a quiet awareness of the vulnerabilities that peace has exposed. Feel the wind change. It carries a different scent now, a hint of salt and distant oceans. Look back at the land routes you've travelled for so long. They feel quieter. The bustling caravans are fewer, the sounds of hooves and camel bells less frequent. Something is shifting. The ancient highways are not gone, but their pulse is slowing. By the 15th century, the world was changing, and the balance of global trade was shifting with it. The Silk Road didn't disappear overnight with a dramatic collapse, but rather faded, gradually, like a sunset giving way to twilight. The reasons were many, complex, and intertwined. Empires that had once provided a degree of stability along the routes began to decline or fragment. The vast Mongol Empire, which had briefly unified much of the continent, broke apart into smaller khanates, and eventually its power waned. Other regional powers rose and fell, creating new instability, new borders, new dangers for overland trade. Feel the growing uncertainty, the increased risk associated with long-distance land journeys. Simultaneously, a new era of exploration and trade was dawning in the West. Feel the pull of the sea. European powers, driven by a desire to bypass the middlemen of the Middle East and control the lucrative spice trade directly, began investing heavily in maritime technology and exploration. Ships became larger, more capable of long ocean voyages. Navigational skills improved. Hear the creak of timber, the snap of sails in the wind. These sea routes, while also perilous, offered distinct advantages over the overland paths. Ships could carry far larger volumes of goods than caravans. They weren't as vulnerable to bandits, though piracy was a risk. They weren't dependent on finding water sources in deserts or navigating treacherous mountain passes. Feel the relative speed and capacity of a ship compared to a camel caravan. As sea trade flourished around the southern tip of Africa, across the Indian Ocean, eventually across the Atlantic, the balance of global commerce tilted. The incredibly valuable goods that once could only travel overland from Asia now had alternative routes, routes that were becoming increasingly efficient and economically competitive. The necessity of the long, slow, expensive relay journeys across Asia diminished for many key goods. Imagine a merchant in Europe or the Middle East now having a choice. They could wait months or years for goods to arrive via the traditional land routes, passing through multiple hands and accumulating costs and risks. Or they could invest in or trade via the new sea routes, which, while involving different risks, promised potentially faster delivery and lower costs per unit of cargo. Feel the economic pressure shifting, the logic of trade favouring the ocean paths. The once vibrant cities along the land routes, the centres of the relay trade and the bustling caravanserais, began to see their importance wane. Some declined, their population shrinking as trade shifted. Others adapted, finding new roles or focusing on regional commerce. But the golden age of being a crucial link in a transcontinental chain was fading. So, the Silk Road didn't end with a dramatic event. It simply became less central, less vital to the main currents of global commerce. The land routes never entirely disappeared. People continued to travel them. Trade continued on a regional basis. But the grand, continuous flow of luxury goods and ideas across the entire length of the web diminished significantly. Look out at the landscape again. The dust is still there. The mountains still stand. The deserts are still vast. The faint tracks remain, perhaps less distinct now, slowly being reclaimed by nature. The caravanserais might stand empty and silent, or perhaps repurposed for local use. Hear the quietness where there once was the constant movement of people and animals. But the story doesn't end there. The echoes of the Silk Road resonate even today. Feel the interconnectedness of the modern world, the global supply chains, the instant communication across continents, the blending of cultures. Much of this interconnectedness, this fundamental wiring of the world, has its roots in those ancient paths, the desire to connect, to trade, to learn from others. That spirit was forged on the Silk Road. The goods that once seemed exotic and rare, spices, silk, porcelain, are now commonplace, products of a globalized economy that the Silk Road helped to initiate. The ideas that flowed, religious concepts, scientific knowledge, artistic styles, have shaped the world we live in. As you stand here, perhaps on a quiet stretch of one of those ancient routes, or simply contemplating their legacy from afar, you understand that while the caravans have largely passed into history, the world they created, the connections they forged, the spirit of curiosity and exchange they embodied, still profoundly shapes the world we trade in today. The dust of the Silk Road may have settled, but its impact is carried on the global winds,